Hi, my name's Amy and I teach in the EAP department. And I'm going to be talking about whisking your way to success in your flipped classroom. You guys know what flipping is? Flipping your class? Are you familiar with it? Has anyone tried it? Okay.
I looked it up last night because of that.
Okay, so basically what it is where you have directed instruction in the classroom. And then you usually go home and you do homework activities. That's the traditional way, right? But the flipped model is where you take that directed instruction and you bring it home. And then that directed instruction could be anything. We commonly think of it now as like videos, right? So that's the popular thing. But it could be really anything. It could be a reading, it could be a podcast or a slideshow, it could be anything. But the resulting classroom activity is supposed to be this dynamic learning environment where the teacher is guiding the students with their application of the concepts that were taught in the video. All right, so when I first discovered flipped learning a few years ago, I actually thought it was quite brilliant. I'm the kind of a student, I think, who would have benefited from it a lot because I have math anxiety. And it's not just your normal average math anxiety. My palms start to sweat, my heart starts to race, and I start to hyperventilate, and I get so nervous in the classroom. I don't like to be put on the spot, right? That I'm trying to write down everything the teacher's saying so that I can perform on the homework, right? But in effect, there's time constraints in the class too. So on top of me being nervous and anxious and the time constraints, I'm really not absorbing any of the information in the lecture. So if I had a video to watch in the comfort of my own home, where I could relax, I could watch the video in my own time, I could review the concepts, and I think that would have been very helpful, right? So knowing how I would feel, I thought maybe I could flip the grammar parts of my class. Grammar is a little bit like math. It makes students really anxious. So I thought I'll flip the grammar parts. So I did a lot of research, and I went to the flipped learning community, and they provided a lot of resources for that commonly asked question, how do I get the students to watch the videos? Because not every student is a good student, right? They don't like to watch the videos. Right? So let's see. Oh, the research that I discovered on this site, one of them was developed by Kirch, and who happens to be a math teacher. She had a lot of extensive information about her process, and she uses the WSQ method, the watch, summarize, and question process. So I've been using this in my class. I've made quite a number of adaptations to suit the students in my class. And my class, I teach ESL, remember? So they're pretty low, and I've had to make lots of modifications. But it's essentially the same. The idea is all the same. So the first part is to watch the video. And the videos generally are 12 to 15 minutes long. I don't want to have really long videos. You could have multiple videos, but just smaller chunks of information. You could curate some, and I've found things online that are great, or you could create your own, and I've created some of my own too. So I've also created note-taking forms, guided forms, because the students, I think it would help them because they have limited language ability, that the note-taking form can help them go through the video step by step. So after they watch, they go through a summary part. So I use a Google form, and I'll explain why in a moment. I know Google is not always the best choice, but if they're advanced students, they could summarize, like write a 5 to 8 sentence summary. That's totally fine. And if your students are high enough, maybe you could, like if you teach ESL, for example, you could evaluate the summary writing skills, just the writing skills. If they're a little bit lower, you could do guided summary. I thought a guided summary would be good for my students, but even that was a little too hard. So I created comprehension questions, and that seems to be working really well. So, and you could use open-ended questions or multiple choice if you're really, lower level. In addition to the summary, they have to write a question. They must write a question. They have to ask one of 3 types of questions, and I provide this for them. So they could ask a clarification question because they don't understand something, a challenge question, something that if they're in the class talking with other students, they want to challenge them with a concept, or they could write an example. And with my students, sometimes they hear things outside and then they come to me and ask a question. But if they just wrote the example, then asked the question, maybe someone in class could discuss it with them. My students are also a little, it's a challenge for them to write questions. So this, I have to provide some kind of question starters. And even then, sometimes we end up having to talk about the grammar of the question because they don't write really good questions. But all of that is contained, so it works really, really well. So let's say you've got your WSQ, you've got your videos, curated or self-made. The next question becomes, what do I do with all this extra class time? And this is where the teacher is going to start to develop anxiety, right? Because the teacher wants, if I'm not going to talk, if I can't speak, then what am I going to do in the class? How are the students going to learn if I'm not saying anything, right? But that's kind of a traditional way of thinking too. So one of the ways I've solved this problem is the Google form. So remember I said I use the Google form. One of the things I do with that is I sit down in front of my computer before the class and I get a chance to look at all of their responses. Mm-hmm. And so I can I manually highlight the problem areas. And I make this accessible for them so they can see it, or I print it out and they talk about it in class. So I already know who's having problems and if I need to create a mini lesson. And if it's all clear and no one's having any problems, then I know, okay, I can just go to the application. They can get to practice this. So what this actually did for me, it sort of transformed my way of thinking a little bit, because you know that there's students who are weak, and then there's students who are strong. So how am I going to differentiate my instruction? That's kind of where I'm starting to go. How can I bring everybody to success in the class at the same time? So I actually started to think about how to arrange the space in the class. This is all coming from the WSQ, right? Just because I did this. So this is very traditional style seating, right? Very teacher-fronted. ESL teachers, we love the horseshoe, but it's still very teacher-fronted. So I started to think about alternative arrangements and groups and clusters. And I thought, they could all be working together, talking and speaking in groups. They could be reviewing the WSQ, but then it started to expand. My thinking started to expand more, and it's like, what if these were like workstations? Like these students here, maybe they've got it, so I could give them a project and they can just go run with it by themselves. These students might need a little bit more practice with something, so I could give them practice exercises. And this team right here, maybe they need some more help, so I have to sit with them and give a little bit more instruction. Or maybe if you're doing individual ones too, maybe there's a student that wants to work by themselves or take a quiz. So there's a lot of variety, and it's really kind of opened up the possibilities in my class. Like, how can I really transform my teaching? So if you also think about how we're actually learning, what we read and what we hear and what we see, we only retain between 10 and 50% of that information just by absorption alone, right? And what we say and what we're doing activity-wise in class, we can retain between 70 and 90% of that information. So if students in our classes are retaining more by doing and speaking, then maybe we as kind of experts in our field should probably say less and elicit more from the students. So when I started using the WSQ, it was really only this way to kind of hold the students accountable for watching the videos, but it's really expanded into something different, and it's transformed my whole teaching experience. So if you guys did it, if you have your WSQ, you've done your videos, what would you do in your classroom during that extra time? So if we could just take maybe 5 minutes or so you could brainstorm with a partner, kind of think, what would you do in that extra class time? What are some ideas that you guys have? Like one or two, maybe share your ideas. Yeah.
Oh. Well, this is a little complicated.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, sorry.
Got 5 now.
Okay, so
3 minutes.
So let's say you had 4 articles that they were supposed to read, and then you put the class into 4 groups the day before these 4 articles are assigned, or the module before.
Okay.
So let's say module 1, you give them you say these 4 articles are going to be for homework, you have to read all of them. But I'm going to put you guys into 4 groups, and each of your 4 groups has to be an expert in one of those. So, and then when they come to class, they will create a little quiz for all the other groups. And then during the break, we will photocopy them and distribute them. And there's more information, but I won't go into it.
Sounds like very project-based.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other ideas you'd like to share? No? Okay, I'll just categorize some of the ideas, right? So you could definitely review stuff, right? You could review the WSQs. I actually have the students access to everyone's responses, so they all get to talk about everybody's response. They can share, compare answers, basic review. But if you want to go a level deeper, it could be some kind of application. So they're taking that point and they're applying the ideas from the lesson to something new, which would give them a lot of learning experience. They could work on a project or activity. They could analyze models, which this is really significant to be able to analyze something, even if it's designed to say what's good or not so good about it, so that they can create something new. Then you can deepen that knowledge by having them connect the ideas to something that's authentic. So if you did some kind of authentic practice in class, maybe they went on a field trip, applying all that information from the video lesson. And the way that they would really, really learn is to challenge them. So it could be as simple as a quiz, but it could be where they're using all these concepts. You just provide a little bit more of a challenge than like maybe a quiz, like the students are providing the quiz. That's actually a very complex idea, right? So then even that, they're going to learn something more if they get a little bit of a challenge. Not too much, but just a little bit. So these are my resources for flipping. You can take photo. I have access to the PowerPoint slide by a QR code. And I encourage you all to try out your adaptation of the WSQ and to really consider thinking about how you can transform your classroom into this dynamic learning space, because that's where the students are going to retain the most information. Okay, thank you. Sure.